Greetings, class. In this installment, we're going to talk about what are identity conflicts. And we're going to break this down in terms of starting from identity. What is identity? Who are you? Identity is all about our position and how we see ourselves in the world. We can have multiple layers to our identity. We can have shifting identities. All of these different features, right? Like when you go to work, you have a different workplace identity than when you're at home, right? At home, you might be, like a brother, right? Your family orientation. Somebody else might be a mother or a grandmother or a daughter. But that identity, that role reflects an orientation to the world. So in my case, right, like I'm, like all of the identities of privilege, right? White, American, cisgendered, heterosexual, American, male, middle-aged, right? The only part there that maybe would be slightly pejorative or derogatory would be the part that losing your hair in middle age is, can be identity impacting, right? That if you love your hair, losing it, not having control over the loss of it or whatever, right? But I mean, like beyond trying to make a joke about aging has some factors that are off-putting, as I'm experiencing it and trying to be at least somewhat comical about I'm, like watching my hairline recede is not something that's super fun or exciting. So much privilege, overflowing in privilege, right? And at the same time, that's my superficial presentation. That's what the world could see me as. But because I'm in higher education, because I got a newly minted PhD, I have become, a graduate before an unexpected, right? Why would we have anticipated a global pandemic? But so at that same time, I'm underemployed, right? Like adjuncting is great short term. I love being in the classroom, but that puts me in a different economic category than people who are actually full-time employees and professors and so forth. So my socioeconomic identity might not be revealed immediately from looking at me, but conversations with people, when they're honest and open, reveal stuff about how they see themselves and how they fit into the world, and prospects of survival and so forth. Anyway, so at any given point in time, you can think about any of these features of myself or anybody's self as being kind of like a light switch. Like they may or may not be turned on at a given point, or they might not be things that you can ever turn off. But so the idea of identity conflict isn't that we have identities so much as we do have identities. And then sometimes the conflicts we have are about our identities or the threats to our identities, which is to say that the place that we inhabit in the world or the way we see ourselves in the world can be challenged or attacked in different ways, and sometimes in ways that seem like existential threats. We recently had a heated election. In some ways, I shouldn't say we had, because in some ways it's ongoing, right? It's November 2020, and Donald Trump has not conceded. He's still challenging that there may have been fraudulent activities that have impacted the outcome, which he is at least still declaring that he has won. But just like in many other cases, the politics put people in positions where they may feel threatened at really elevated levels. So instead of talking about Donald Trump and talking about how do we address the conflicts that exist, we can look at any of the past examples. Same thing in politics in 2020 has taken place. In 2004, we have a completely similar example that politically, it seemed expedient to increase voter turnout in support of George W. Bush by having certain ballot initiatives that made it onto the ballot in different states, so that while people were going to go vote to say that they didn't believe that same-sex couples should be able to get legally married, that while they were in there voting to condemn that form of love, that while they were in there doing that, that they would vote for George W. Bush at the same time, right? Great example. Politically, we could see the numbers in a number of states where that happened. In some cases, the state may have ended up leaning for John Kerry, who was the candidate that year, but not have done a successful defense of the marriage protection for all. But so in a year like that, where one party or one candidate is making clear efforts to mobilize people to deny them of their basic civil rights, basic civil liberties, human dignity, and so forth, their identity of, in that case, being homosexual would be very, very much triggered by the fact that people are actively mobilizing to have prejudice against them. And we can understand prejudice as denying others of the rights that we enjoy for superficial differences, which is to say that we do have legitimate reasons to deny people of rights, right? Like people's rights get taken away when they are convicted in a court of law for having committed certain crimes, right? You could take somebody's rights away with cause. It's a different argument than taking somebody's rights away without cause. And I don't want to be like some moral guardian or something telling you which things are justifiable or which things aren't. I have some of my own issues about how our criminal justice system works and how incarceration works and how disproportionate rates in different populations showcase what I believe to be is strong evidence that we have a prejudicial system of justice. In particular, poor people are more likely to spend more time in jail. Charged with the same offenses, whether or not you have hired an attorney or have a public defender assigned to you by a court. Huge difference in outcomes. Right? Two different people, maybe both plead guilty. Plea agreements are better for one group than the other, right? Just having a stronger advocate and hiring someone as opposed to the overworked in most jurisdictions public defenders. Anyway, so back to this identity conflict. If you're being targeted not for something that you've done, but just solely on the basis of who you are, that's a very, very big, scary, menacing threat. Sometimes it can threaten your entire population. We have history. Global history, where we see that, genocide has been frequent to return, that groups of people are blamed with the struggles of the planet or the nation, or as being, on the opposing evil side in a class of civilizations. So identity conflict's a bit different, in part because it attacks who somebody is, like their soul, their very nature. And it also doesn't seem like that there's any way that there could be any sort of negotiable way of being able to respond to kind of this intractable position of one side believes I should be allowed to live in peace and the other side believes you are a threat to the morality that I want to see in the world. So, identity conflicts, big deal. Maybe it doesn't always lead to genocide. Maybe that's hyperbolic. But it is a real feature of our history. Some people carry this trauma with them. They know that Their people have been targeted. Their people have been oppressed. And that's a really big challenge, right? It's a heavy trauma to carry. Those are durable scars. And in many cases, we are negligent to taking action to heal from this kind of pejorative animus and the turbulent history of people who have been oppressed or victimized, or people who blame others for their oppression or victimization. And when we assign this, when we attribute the characteristics of being perpetrators of good or evil in the world to people based upon their association with these identities, that is a different kind of conflict to engage in. And I'll see you guys in the next one.